Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, March 5th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 881 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we discuss the United States and Israel's war of aggression against Iran, Iran's retaliation against U.S. bases and assets across the Gulf region and against Israel, and Hezbollah's targeting of Israeli positions from Lebanon. It's total war. And Donya Abu Sitta joins us from Gaza to talk about the situation there as Israel maintains its siege and continues its attacks. Later on in the program, Jon will cover 100 hours of the U.S. and Israeli war against Iran. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israeli forces continued to violate the fraudulent ceasefire in Gaza this week, killing Palestinians and reimposing a total closure of the crossings to humanitarian aid, food, fuel, and medicine. In the town of Bani Suhaila near Khan Yunis on Wednesday, Israeli soldiers shot and killed two Palestinians, Montasser Samur and Maher Samur. According to local news sources, an Israeli military unit abducted the two men and took them across the so-called Yellow Line, detained them, and shot them. Reporter Tamer Keshta captured video footage and eyewitness testimony from residents who said that the Israeli army returned Montasser Samur's body riddled with bullets, while Maher Samur was shot and killed in what witnesses described as a field execution. One man showing the journalist the wounds on one of the men's body says, quote, "This is torture. They kidnapped him and threw his body at the Al-Karara bridge. A witness said one man was shot in the chest and ran. He fell and was martyred. This one was shot in the legs. They took him and fled. When we brought him here, his whole chest, his whole abdomen was full of bullets. Executed. The witness said the men were going to pick radishes and chard for their families. They were staying and living there. He was a caretaker in a destroyed house on land near the Yellow Line. He slept and lived there day after day, night after night. We're on that land every day." Anadolu news agency reported that earlier in the day, heavy gunfire from Israeli military vehicles stationed east of the so-called Yellow Line was reported in those areas near Khan Yunis, and that Israeli artillery also targeted neighborhoods east of Gaza City, while Israeli gunboats fired toward the coastline. Last week, on February 26th, Israeli warplanes targeted a Palestinian police checkpoint at the entrance to the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least one police officer and injuring another, according to the Palestinian Ministry of the Interior and National Security. The Ministry of Health in Gaza reported on Wednesday that since the so-called ceasefire went into effect nearly 5 months ago, at least 633 Palestinians have been killed and more than 1,700 have been injured. In the same time period, the health ministry stated that more than 750 bodies of Palestinians have been recovered so far from underneath the rubble after more than 2 years of genocide. The Civil Defense Corps in northern Gaza stated this week that they had finished a 9-day operation that they called the Dignity of Martyrs campaign, in which they recovered 93 bodies of Palestinians killed in Israeli airstrikes and buried beneath collapsed homes. In the absence of heavy equipment and fuel to operate machinery, which continue to be blocked by the Israelis, the civil defense workers used their hands and simple tools to retrieve the human remains. The civil defense said that more than 500 bodies remain under the rubble, denying surviving family members the dignity of properly burying their loved ones. Civil defense worker Mohammed Loai filmed himself and his colleagues working tirelessly in the mountains of rubble and said that they are working to renew the campaign in order to retrieve all of the bodies in that area. In the immediate aftermath of the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran that began over the weekend, the Israeli government and military closed all of the crossings into and out of Gaza, further exacerbating the humanitarian and infrastructure crisis. On Tuesday, the Kerem Shalom or Kerem Abu Salim crossing in the south of Gaza was partially opened, but all other crossings have remained closed, including the Rafah crossing at the Egyptian border, which had been partially reopened since early February and was used for people returning to Gaza and medical evacuations from Gaza. In addition, according to the Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz, the Allenby Bridge crossing between Jordan and the West Bank has likewise been closed to goods and humanitarian aid following a decision by the Israeli Airports Authority, which oversees the crossing. Writing in the LA Times this week, Ahmed Khan of the eponymous humanitarian aid organization, the Ahmed Khan Foundation, stated that, quote, for more than 5 months, 15,000 boxes of children's cold medicine and other vital medicines meant for kids in the Gaza Strip have been sitting in a warehouse, awaiting approval from Israeli authorities that never seems to come. To Israeli officials, the cold medicine I am trying to deliver is a potential weapon, he adds. Quote, Israeli officials fear that Hamas will steal the bottles and transform the small amounts of glycerin in the medicine to make explosives, despite there being no evidence that armed groups in Gaza have done or could do this. Israel has refused to clarify what percentage of glycerin would be allowed, so we can't even source an alternative that would be assured of clearance. The medicine remains in a warehouse while children in Gaza continue to die because they can't get basic treatments. Meanwhile, the United Nations Humanitarian Office stated that between the October 2025 so-called ceasefire and until mid-February, quote, an additional 853 people have reportedly acquired new disabilities. This includes 496 new amputations, 186 spinal cord injuries, and 171 traumatic brain injuries. The UN added that despite rising needs, assistive products, including prosthetics, continue to be classified by the Israeli authorities as dual-use items, which severely restricts their entry into the Gaza Strip. During this period, only 300 artificial limbs were allowed to enter Gaza under the health cluster framework, while the cumulative number of amputations since October 2023 now exceeds 5,000, in addition to the 496 new amputations recorded since the ceasefire. Shelter materials are also being heavily restricted by Israel. According to the UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric on Wednesday, if the rainy season continues, hundreds of thousands of people whose homes have been destroyed remain at risk of flooding in their dilapidated tents. Dujarric said that 8 temporary relocation sites have been established in Gaza, but critical materials remain out of reach. Quote, we and our partners still do not have the tools and the materials to make shelters that are longer lasting, he said, noting that the entry of these supplies continues to be heavily restricted and they're difficult to find on the local markets. Such supplies include toolkits, timber and cement to repair homes, and heavy machinery to clear rubble and to make more space for dignified housing. Turning to the occupied West Bank, dozens of Israeli settlers attacked the village of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 near Nablus in the north on Tuesday. One of the attacking settlers is a reservist soldier who shot and killed 2 Palestinian men, Mohammed Taha Muammar, who was shot in the head, and his brother Fahim Taha Muammar, who was shot in his lower body. Eyewitnesses reported that armed settlers carrying rifles and iron bars stormed homes in the southern part of the village and opened fire on residents. At least 3 other people were injured in the attack, according to Middle East Monitor, including a 30-year-old man with a shoulder wound, a 32-year-old man with a knee injury, and a 15-year-old boy who sustained a gunshot wound to the shoulder. Also on Tuesday, Israeli forces opened fire on a Palestinian man and a child in the Askar refugee camp east of Nablus on the 2nd consecutive day of invasions and raids by the army. The Palestine Red Crescent Society reported that its teams treated a 20-year-old young man who was shot in the foot with live bullets and an 11-year-old child who was shot in the hand. The army conducted home raids and subjected residents to interrogations, the local Wafa news agency reported. On Wednesday, Wafa reported that Israeli soldiers shot and injured 5 Palestinians in Jenin during an invasion in the central part of the city. A medical source at Al-Razi Hospital in Jenin told the news agency that among the injured was a young man who was shot in the back, with the bullet exiting through his chest, leaving him in critical condition. And in Jerusalem, Israeli occupation authorities closed the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound since the U.S. and Israel launched attacks on Iran, preventing worshippers from entering the mosque and the surrounding courtyards during Ramadan. Israeli forces have imposed an almost complete closure of the occupied West Bank since Saturday's attacks on Iran, locking barriers and gates and closing all checkpoints until, quote, further notice, as 𝐄𝐥𝐞, the Israeli military's bureaucratic wing, said on February 28th. We've published many features in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Saving Lives at a Time of Slaughter by Samah Zahar 𝐓𝐡𝐞, writing from Gaza. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 profiles Dr. Bakr Abu Safiya, a 65-year-old senior surgeon who worked at Al-Awda Hospital in Jabalia, northern Gaza, at the beginning of Israel's genocide. He recounts how he barely escaped death while treating his patients, narrowly avoiding an Israeli sniper's bullet inside the hospital in 2024. Despite all this danger, Dr. Bakr Abu Safiya pushed himself beyond the limits, refusing to leave his patients, as he said, was the only surgeon in northern Gaza, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 writes. On October 16, 2024, Dr. Bakr was managing 2 operating rooms simultaneously, he said, while 2 other critical patients waited in the reception area. Meanwhile, his cousin, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, transferred to him 4 cases, and in less than half an hour later, he sent 10 more. But Bakr Abu Safiya sorted through these other cases and kept working from 3 p.m. until 2:45 a.m., where in 12 hours, he performed 14 surgeries, including 3 cases that needed kidney removal and other cases involving damaged spleens, livers, or intestines. Abu Safiya would sometimes perform surgeries that were not his specialty. His erstwhile colleague, Dr. Saeed Judah, would sometimes send him vascular surgery cases. It wasn't my specialty, but I had studied it, and since no one else was there, I did the surgeries, Abu Safiya said. I never failed a surgery. Some patients needed to be transferred to Gaza City for plastic or orthopedic surgery, but since many couldn't, I did 2 orthopedic surgeries myself, even though it wasn't my specialty. Abu Safiya said that what caused him deep psychological pain, which still affects him, is losing coworkers or watching them get detained. On December 12, 2024, Dr. Saeed Judah was killed when an Israeli tank fired at the car he was in, marked with a red crescent sign and a white flag. Not long after, the Israeli army abducted Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya on December 27, 2024. He's still suffering in Israeli dungeons. Before the January 2025 ceasefire was announced, the Israeli army besieged Al-Awda Hospital for the 3rd time, blocking all the roads that surrounded the hospital with sand barriers, allowing no cars or even ambulances to get through. The hospital relied on a small generator to run medical equipment for a few hours daily. Its staff used the remaining fuel to power the operating rooms, reception, and lab, limiting surgical procedures to life-saving cases. Abu Safiya said that they had to carry the wounded to the operating rooms with help from others as there were no elevators. I can never forget an 8-year-old boy who begged me not to cut his leg, Abu Safiya said. I promised him that I will do everything I can to save it. And we did. After the ceasefire was announced in January 2025, Abu Safiya's family returned to northern Gaza. When Abu Safiya reunited with them and saw his children, he was shocked by how they looked, something that broke him from the inside. They looked tanned and had lost a lot of weight, he said. After Israel unilaterally ended the January ceasefire, the Israeli army besieged the hospital for the fourth and last time. It was the worst, Abu Sitta said. I was the only surgeon in northern Gaza, the sole specialist in everything. Even in total darkness and without internet or phone service, we kept working as best we could. The area was emptied, and we were the last to leave, Abu Sitta said of the Israeli army ordering them to evacuate on June 28, 2025. Those still in Al-Awda Hospital left in health ministry coordinated vehicles from northern Gaza to Gaza City, he said, as there was nothing left. There were no supplies, no food, no water, Abu Sitta said. The hospital could no longer function. No one could reach the hospital thereafter. After the so-called October 2025 ceasefire, Al-Awda Hospital was located behind Israel's new yellow line. Abu Sitta returned with his family to another apartment he has in Gaza City, since his first one is uninhabitable after being burned by the Israeli army. But we endure. I continue to work, he said, of working in Al-Awda Hospital in Nuseirat. Inshallah, this will ease one day. Those are excerpts from Saving Lives at a Time of Slaughter by Samah Zahar Zakut, a lecturer at the University College of Applied Sciences, an online tutor, and a translator, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza, the paracycling team and mutual aid organization, the Gaza Sunbirds, rehabilitated an area in the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza to build a volleyball court for the children. They say, quote, 52% of our land is now occupied. We're here at the yellow line in Burej camp, claiming our streets through sports and tradition. This volleyball court is one of many activities we have planned to bring sports to every corner of the strip. Ramadan Kareem to you all from Gaza, the Sunbirds say. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. Thank you for that news roundup.
Yeah.
It's so important to keep the focus on Gaza right now with everything that's happening. Understandably, people are worried and concerned, and we're going to talk about all of that.
Yeah.
But we are going to keep the focus on Gaza with our next guest.
Yeah. And then, so we're going to go watch the interview that we did recently with Donya Abu Sitta, our contributor, a teacher, a writer, a medical student now. And then we'll come back and you're going to take us through kind of a broad analysis of what has been happening with the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran and the repercussions. And then we'll hear from Jon, of course, about the kind of granular military analysis. So it's a full show today. Let's go to Donya, and then we'll be back right after that.
I'm Ali Abunimah here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. And just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. We're pleased now to be joined by Donya Abu Sitta in Gaza. She's a longtime contributor to the Electronic Intifada, a teacher, and recently started studying medicine. She also recently wrote a feature for Al Jazeera English called Children in Gaza Forced to Focus on Work Rather Than School. Welcome, Donya. It's so nice to see you again.
Hello, everyone, and Ramadan Kareem. It was a while since our last meeting, so I missed you so much. And I would like to thank everyone who sent message to me asking about me. And also, I would like to thank you, Ali, and Laura, and Tamara, and every Electronic Intifada team for your efforts since years. To be honest, it's my honor to be with you here today to speak about what is happening around me. When I was speaking to my friends outside Gaza Strip, I recognized there is a serious misunderstanding because they believe so-called ceasefire is the end of our suffering and returning to our natural life. But sadly, our third story is continuous, as shelling and bombing has not stopped yet, and university change into shelters, hospitals without enough equipment and medicine, children without families, education, and childhood. As I'm going in the morning to workspace to download my lectures and writing my research, I see young, tired, sad children, who each of them carrying a bag in which they are collected paper, nylons, or any kind of waste that they can use to light a fire, just to prepare the food. Is this a childhood for the world? Also, as the UNICEF reported, more than 64,000 children have been killed or injured, and more than 56,000 of the children lost one or both parents, while widespread of famine, displacement, and trauma, as all of these are have a serious aspect of their childhood, and many children forced to focus on work rather than schools to supply food and necessary needs for their families. For example, the story of Mahmoud, who he is 15 years old and he lost his father last year. He has five siblings.
Donya, just sorry to interrupt you. I just want to show people the article you wrote for Al Jazeera again, because you tell the story of Mahmoud in this article and of
Yes.
other children. So we want you to talk about the situation of children like Mahmoud. So tell us more about Mahmoud and what and why you decided to write about his story for Al Jazeera.
Actually, it's not only the story of Mahmoud. There are many children like him in the street where I was working in the morning. I see them day after day, and I decided to be a voice of these children because they lost their childhood. They have a responsibility for their families after they lost their father, and they are lost in harsh conditions, in a cold and overused tent. And every morning, rather than going to school, they go to work, and they lose their rights to learn, and they have the responsibility for younger siblings. And he works many hours during the day just to supply the necessary things for their siblings. And it's not the story of this family only, because most families in Gaza Strip lost their source of income after the war take more than 2 years, and they are lived in tents with harsh conditions and in severe cold. The children were lost all their rights, and parents are suffering because they don't have and they cannot apply a suitable life for their children. And imagine, like, every day our parents wake up in tents without any ability to provide their children with the most basic rights, and a little child asks, for example, for a piece of candy, and the parents don't have the ability to provide this for him. And it's the most basic thing for children.
Dunya, let me ask you something about the situation in Gaza now, since the so-called ceasefire. And as you said, it's been a long time, too long, since we spoke to you, and we missed you very much as well. We heard that there is more food and supplies coming into Gaza. We even saw, I remember seeing some videos of Coca-Cola coming into Gaza. Describe the situation. On the one hand, we have heard from some people that there is more food coming in the market, but how much food can people actually get? Because if you don't have money to buy the food, how do people get food? Is there aid? Are people still hungry? Just give us a sense of what the reality is like now.
Okay. The trip needs 1,000 francs daily to fill the gap of food needs. Yet there are only 200 to 300 tracks entering Gaza daily as occupations allow, and it is not to provide the food security for families in Gaza. So there are more suffering to get it. And also on other side, the families lost their jobs and the source income. And as the last event, there are worries about clothing crossing. So they are start to getting any way to store food because they are fear if there will become a new famine.
And have in the last week, since the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran started, Israel announced that it was closing the crossings into Gaza. Do you know if those crossings are reopened? The Israeli occupation authorities said that some of the crossings at least would be reopened today, Wednesday, when we're recording this. What do you know about the crossings, and how was the closure of them impacting people directly?
Okay, on February 28th, I woke up as a normal day and I go to a space where I get good connections, and I don't know about the news. And when I reach to the place, I found people are asking to pay food and store it, uh, and talking about the last news. And when I go to bring some necessary for my family, I feel the markets are full of people. You cannot work. You cannot have the ability to pay what you want, and also the most of people are paying the best necessary, which is the flour, sugar, and oil, and it is finished in the market, and this is what makes people more worried about the coming day, because if there are a new famine, maybe they lost their elders and children.
Donya, can you this is the month of Ramadan in Gaza. Talk about what the atmosphere is like. How is this Ramadan different from what you experienced during the most intense phase of the genocide and before the war?
Yes, actually, it's the third Ramadan we spend outside our homes as a place. In 2023, we are spent it in Rafah in Athens, and in 2024 we spend it as a place, and there are the second coming in it, and this one is having a feeling of fear because of a coming famine. But despite of all of this, we are have this idea that Ramadan is a sample of joy and happiness and family gathering. So we decided to bring joy this year from the simplest thing. For example, my youngest sibling create Ramadan lantern from work for the program boxes, and after that they cover it with color fabric, and after that put colorful lights on an attempt to make a joy and happiness like our years before the war.
Donya,
And
we
we are
actually have a video that you wanted to show. Can we show the video now? We'll show some of the
yes.
video and have you talk about what we're seeing in it. So, Donya, talk about what we're seeing in the video and how people are celebrating or observing Ramadan in Gaza right now.
Okay. The voice of this video was the first day of Ramadan. I recorded for the children in my neighborhood, and the videos what my younger friends make for this month, because they are love the idea of Ramadan, and they have it is a symbol of joy and happiness, and they bring it with and painted it with colorful ideas and colorful things. And also, not we are as a family only bring joy and happiness for our Ramadan in this year, but all families in that trip. And for example, they make or set tents for prayer rather than bumped mosques, and we are hearing the sound of al-adhan after 3 years, and also the sound of musaharat, who is the person who calling and pumping at the time of Asur to wake up the people. And we lost this last 2 years, and it's a simple thing, but they give us the meaning of life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Donya, as Ali mentioned earlier, you're a teacher, and every time we talk to you, you show such concern and love for children in Gaza, of course. Talk about how children are doing now. Is educate, are schools back in session? Are they getting any of the support that they need after experiencing so much trauma? Being able to celebrate Ramadan is, I'm sure, just so healing in so many ways for kids after so much death and destruction around them, which of course hasn't stopped, as you said. But give us a sense of whether there's any sort of return to normalcy for children right now, especially the children that you're working so closely with.
Okay. At the beginning, according to the United Nations, there are more than 97% of schools were or have destroyed or damaged, and most of 658,000 children in school age have been limited source for in-person learning for more than 2 academic years. And as we know, in these days, the schools didn't return back as a normal yet, and there is a limited of education fund. And for example, my young sibling, they didn't have yet education fund to accept them, because the all education fund are full before we are returned to our city, and they are not just them. There are many children like them cannot uh, give access for education because there are not enough places and education funds. And also in another side, yes, the teachers in the education front try to heal the children by using stories and plays and games, just to give them the meaning of the life for the world, because they are losing this for more than 2 years.
Are you seeing, Dunya, any talk about international aid organizations and local aid organizations, whether it's to help children, whether it's to provide food, whether it's to provide medical care? Do you see any presence from international aid organizations in Gaza right now?
Okay, about international organizations, as you see in the last news, they are so limited to it, and as they are as medical Doctors Without Borders to finish their duty in Gaza Strip and don't allow to them to work more and more in Gaza Strip rather than we are more needed for them in these days. And also for they don't allow for the best items to enter Gaza that help to rebuild, that help to recover people, allow to people to recover from what they faced in this year. And also for ad they don't allow for enough tracks to enter that cover all people or all families here. So there's more limited because some family take ads and the most of family didn't have access to it because there's more limited and there's more like the most needed family who take this ad and the, the major of families in Gaza don't have access for this.
So not so the number of families receiving aid in the form of food packages and things like that is much less than the need, it sounds like. What about local initiatives? I remember you were involved during the war. We talked about this in a school, an informal school for children. We also saw many times that there were community kitchens where people were making food for people in the community. Are there still efforts like that happening in Gaza right now?
Yes, it's happening right now, but it is a little because these projects or need funds to keep on and continue, and there is no serious or continuous funds for this. So the people are volunteers to doing this, and also these people are need the income or funds to for their lives. So they are start volunteering and working at the same time. And after that, they are very tired. So they start with some people stop volunteering, and after that, a new people come and people are searching now for safety, for stability. So they are want to rebuild a new life from 0 points. So they need to income for keep the life for return to the normal life. For the war, we are have our regular job. So if I want to volunteer, there are many hours so I can volunteer in it, and I feel job security because I have a regular job. So I can volunteer while I have job. But when I don't have job, I don't feel for volunteer. So I want to search for a job that can give me job security, and after that, I will do volunteer more and more.
So it sounds like an important message or something I'm hearing that viewers, people viewing and listening need to know is that if there are projects in Gaza that are continuing, that they're supporting, they should keep supporting them because the need is still there and people in Gaza still need a lot of support. So is that something that you would agree with? People outside Gaza should still keep supporting people inside Gaza.
Yes, I totally agree with that because it helps people to keep on and they have less effort to thinking about funds and so on, and also publishing and reading about what happening also help people here because there are more people caring about them, they thinking of them, and they are not just like a number because they have stories that across to the world.
Mm. That's a really important reminder. Thank you for that, Donya. I want to ask, we just have a couple minutes left, but You're on top of being a teacher and a writer and a volunteer, you're also a student. You're studying medicine. I don't know where you have the time, but I am just always in awe of you. But can you talk a little bit about why you're going into medicine? What the need is right now in Gaza? I mean, throughout the last, 4.5 months of this fraudulent ceasefire, the 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 medical infrastructure remains completely collapsed. Um, Basic medications, basic medical supplies remain blocked by the Israelis on the other side of the crossing. Um, as we've talked about so many times on this program, every single hospital and clinic has been bombed, several times over the last 2.5 years. There's such an enormous need for repair and rehabilitation of the medical system. Why are you going into medicine, and what does the need look like right now in Gaza?
Yes. If we look close to the situation around medical part, the most or more than almost all hospitals have been damaged or destroyed during the war, and most doctors have been assisted or arrested. So this medical part needs power to keep on. Because if we look also for the number of injured in the war, they are increased. Until this moment, they are increased because they are targeting the eastern areas in the strip, and every day there are coming injured people in the hospital. And this hospital don't have enough equipment, don't have enough medicine. For example, when I was studying for my pharmacology, and I'm thinking why I'm study pharmacology while medicine are stuck outside Gaza in Rafah crossing, and we are studying about pathology while I'm seeing this disease in the face of the children around me and the people around me because of viruses and cold and unhumanitarian conditions. And also, if we look, there is uh, a limited specialized doctors here in Gaza Strip, and we are need more specialized doctors. So I also have a message for doctors around the world. They can come here and help in many departments because there are a limit for doctors in a department and also for equipment.
Well, it's incredible that you are taking on the incredibly difficult and challenging task of studying medicine. That's hard enough for anyone, but to do it under the difficult circumstances in Gaza shows how determined you are, Donya, to help your community, how committed you are to your community, and particularly to the children in Gaza. That's something that has always been so clear every time we talk to you and in all your writing, including the article you wrote for Al Jazeera that we spoke about. So we missed you for a long time, Donya. I hope we'll see you again soon, but we're happy that you joined us today, and we're so grateful to you for all the work you're doing. And we thank you also for the reminder to everybody who's watching and listening to continue to speak about Gaza, to continue to share information about Gaza, and to continue to support people in Gaza. And we are with you, and we, on behalf of all of our viewers and listeners, Donya, we send you our love and our solidarity and our support to you and your family and all around you, especially during this month of Ramadan.
Thank you, and thank to everyone who watched this live stream.
Thank you so much, Donya. Yes, thank you, Donya. Thank you, Ali. We were having some issues, of course, with the sound. I mean, people in Gaza are not able to get, proper equipment for interviews, and so we're, she was doing her best, and we're doing our best, and we'll get that.
We want to make sure she and other colleagues in Gaza heard, and she had to travel some distance to get to a place where she could find internet. So we're very grateful to Donya for doing that. And please keep in mind what she said.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so shifting gears for the second half of the show, Ali, you're going to take us through the political analysis of the developments of the last 6 days. And then we will be back with Jon, and then we'll come back for a group discussion. So, Ali, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Nora. And just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abunimah. On Saturday, the United States and Israel launched a war of aggression against Iran, murdering its leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and declaring that their goal is to topple the country's system of government. As I wrote for the Electronic Intifada, killing Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of a sovereign state who is also a revered spiritual leader to tens of millions of Muslims in an unprovoked war of aggression, is a flagrant act of international terrorism. It is an enormous crime. In the first few days, the joint attack, including indiscriminate bombing of civilians, has, according to the latest count, killed 1,045 people in Iran and injured thousands more. Iran is retaliating against US bases and assets across the Gulf region and against Israel, killing 24 people, 11 in Israel and about a dozen in other countries so far. This is a video aired by Al Jazeera and shared widely in the last hour or so, showing some of the damage from Iranian missiles in Tel Aviv. There's been very strict censorship, so we've seen remarkably little of what has been going on in Israel, and I will probably talk about that more later. From Lebanon, Hezbollah has joined the battle, targeting Israeli positions, and Jon Elmer is going to take us through that later in the show. Israeli bombing has killed more than 100 people across Lebanon and displaced tens of thousands more. Today, Israel threatened the entire population of Beirut's southern suburb, telling them they had to evacuate. It is total war. The scenes across Iran show that Israel and the United States are engaging in indiscriminate bombing of civilians. In addition to the more than 1,000 people killed, Iran's health ministry says that 2,500 people are being treated in hospital and thousands more were treated and released. 180 of those killed are children, most in the horrific massacre on the first day in the elementary school in Minab in southern Iran. Middle East Eye has managed to collect the names of many of these children and their ages, and most of them are under the age of 10 years old. Now, let's there we can see on the screen the names of many of those children who were massacred on the first day of this war of aggression in the school in Hormozgan province, the city of Minab in southern Iran. In a repeat of Israel's Gaza doctrine, also known as the Dahya doctrine, which is the deliberate, indiscriminate destruction of civilian infrastructure, the US and Israel are targeting civilian institutions across Iran. They've hit 21 hospitals, according to Iranian authorities, They're also attacking emergency services, police stations, courts, sports stadiums, and other civil and governmental facilities with the goal of destroying the Iranian state and society. Let's listen to Ahmed Nejatian, the president of the Iranian Nursing Organization, speaking from Tehran earlier.
Here is a central hospital in Tehran, where in the last few days was open to provide healthcare services to all citizens. Unfortunately, after a very heavy air attacks to the near of this hospital, many of wards of this hospital was destroyed, and all the patient was evacuated and transferred to other hospitals. In the middle of unwanted and imposed.
So, what are the US and Israeli goals, and where are we going? The US and Israel seem to have made a major miscalculation. It looks like their strategy was that a quick shock and or attack and the murder of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei would lead to the quick collapse of the government, the military, and bring on a popular uprising. In other words, they didn't expect there to be very much fighting. Let's look now at how US President Donald Trump set up this attack in his video address announcing the assault on 28th of February.
From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protest.
So that's the narrative. We've heard it many times before. And of course, the claims about tens of thousands of Iranian protesters being killed have no basis in reality. We discussed that previously. More than 3,000 people were killed, Iran acknowledged, but that they say that it was as a result of a US and Mossad-backed insurgency, and hundreds of them were police and soldiers. Trump also claimed that Iran was trying to develop nuclear weapons and long-range missiles that could threaten the US, and he calls Iranian leaders evil. Then he says the following.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made similar statements about overthrowing the government, but I'm going to spare us all the additional suffering of listening to him. Now, this was the same calculation underlying the Israeli-American attack on Iran in June last year, the so-called 12-day war, and it was the calculation underlying the terrorist insurgency sponsored by Mossad in the United States in January that I just mentioned. It's unclear why they think that what failed repeatedly would work this time. I suspect they truly believed their own propaganda that Iran is a one-man dictatorship and that Khamenei was hated and killing him would be the factor that made the difference this time, but it didn't work. In a country of 90 million people, there are undoubtedly some who hate their government to the extent that they would support an all-out war against their own country. But there has been no sign of a popular uprising against the government. On the contrary, there has been a massive national outpouring of support for the martyred leader and demands for revenge every night in cities across the country. Here, for example, in Zahedan, and I believe this was last night, you can hear people chanting in support of the army and the IRGC, the Islamic Republican Guard Corps. And you can see them holding pictures of Imam Khamenei. And here in this video, they can be heard chanting against Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, who, of course, Israel and the United States have talked about installing. And they also can be heard chanting, "No compromise, no surrender, we want revenge." I'm actually playing the video without sound because some of the other slogans might trigger the algorithm to restrict us, and I'm being careful. But you can take my word for it that that's what they're saying. And here's a woman in Tehran who is saying, our heads, she says, our heads are held up high because our leader was martyred in his office working for this country. He didn't get on a plane to flee the country. And those men are expressing support as well. These are just a few examples from the past 24 hours, but there are countless verifiable videos of enormous gatherings in cities all over Iran, just as there were after the June war and the January insurgency. There is simply no evidence that the Iranian people are about to overthrow their government. So, having failed to foment an uprising, it looks like the United States and Israel are going to the familiar tactic of trying to stoke civil war and terrorism, just as they did in Syria. Look at this headline in the New York Times today. Pro-American Kurdish forces are preparing possible Iran incursion. And it says, pro-American Iranian Kurdish forces based in Iraq are preparing armed units that could enter Iran, creating a potential new front in an already expanding conflict, according to Iraqi officials and senior members of Iranian Kurdish groups. The CIA has previously given small arms to the Iranian Kurdish forces as part of a covert program to destabilize Iran, an effort that began before the current war, according to people familiar with this effort. So more, just as they were doing in January and before, the United States and Israel have been fomenting terrorism and insurgency against Iran for a long time. The Washington Post has a similar story today, goes even further. The headline there, Trump calls on Kurds to aid U.S. effort in Iran, offers support. And it says, the Trump administration bracing for more U.S. casualties and considering whether to put ground troops in Iran has begun reaching out to Tehran's domestic opposition as potential allies to foment an uprising against the regime. In calls this week to Kurdish minority leaders in Iran and neighboring Iraq, President Donald Trump offered extensive U.S. air cover and other backing for anti-regime Iranian Kurds to take over portions of western Iraq, according to multiple people familiar with the effort. But as we can see, this even raises, as some other officials have, the prospect of directly putting U.S. ground troops in there as well. So we're heading for escalation. I'll say more about that. But I just want to have a look also at public opinion around the war. And there were a slew of new polls just in the last day or two. The New York Times reports today 3 high-quality polls taken after the United States and Israel launched their attack on Iran on Saturday show that the majority of Americans are not on board with the military action. About 60% of Americans disapproved of the attacks, according to a CNN poll conducted immediately after the strikes. 2 other polls by Reuters, Ipsos, and the Washington Post had similar results. Interestingly, it says that all 3 polls found that Republicans were generally supportive, even as most of them also said that they wanted America to pull back on foreign wars. Democrats were nearly universally opposed. And in all these polls that I've looked at, whatever support there is for the war evaporates to single digits, more or less, when you talk about putting in US ground troops. Now, let's look at the situation in Israel. Here's a headline from the Times of Israel. Poll: most Jewish Israelis support Iran war toppling regime. And the story tells us an overwhelming majority of Jewish Israelis support Israel's ongoing military campaign against Iran, and many believe it should continue until the fall of the Islamic Republic. That's according to a poll by the Israel Democracy Institute on Wednesday. The poll found profound backing for Operation Roaring Lion, as Israel calls it, among Jewish respondents, with 93% expressing support. Now, if you break it down, we're always told that, there's a peace camp in Israel. Well, according to the poll, among Jewish respondents, those on the right, 97% support the operation, and among those on the left, 76% support it. So your Israeli leftists are overwhelmingly in support of this war. And this is important because we're often told by politicians in the West that the problem is Benjamin Netanyahu. You'll often hear, for example, Senator Bernie Sanders and other so-called progressives in the US directing their criticism at Netanyahu by name and not at Israel. But what these numbers tell us, as polls have throughout the genocide in Gaza, is it's not just a Netanyahu problem, it's an Israel problem. This is a fully genocidal society. Now, there's a lot of debate in the United States about whether this war was for Israel and whether Trump and the United States were dragged into war for Israel. And we've heard many senior officials, including Marco Rubio and Donald Trump himself, making comments that the war was to defend Israel, or that Israel would have started the war and then Iran would have attacked, so we had to go in preemptively. They keep changing their story. To me, I think we have to say that it is a war for Israel, but it is just as equally, if not more so, a war of US global dominance and imperialism. Nonetheless, in the last 30 years that I've been observing events, I've never before seen such a backlash against Israel in the United States, with people on the left and right saying openly that it's a war for Israel and they don't want to fight it. And yet, some are demanding not only ground troops in Iran, but direct US involvement in Lebanon as well. And I want to show you this clip of Senator Lindsey Graham directly addressing President Donald Trump.
Support Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. One thing to President Trump, in case you're watching. In 1983, Ronald Reagan sent Marines and sailors to try to police and deal with the Lebanese civil war. They were at the end of the runway. Hezbollah attacked the Marine barracks, killed 220 Marines, 18 sailors, and wounded 100 others. Ronald Reagan, who I admire and love, withdrew and never did anything about it. So I'm calling on President Trump today. Join Israel to attack Hezbollah. Avenge the Marines. America never forgets. Those 220 Marines and 18 sailors' families, we want to go after the infrastructure that killed your loved ones. They're IRGC assets in Beirut as I speak. President Trump, come up with a new operation called Simplify. Fly with Israel and go after Hezbollah, who has American blood on its hands. Not only take the mothership of Iran down, also take the proxy of Hezbollah, settle the score, even the account.
So you can see where Lindsey Graham wants this to go. Now, I want to look at a little bit at the bigger picture of this war. Jon will be taking us through the military aspects, which are crucial, but this is not just a military war. It is also a global economic war. And as of right now, the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. This is the narrow passage that all ships have to pass through to get in and out of the Persian Gulf. About 1/5 of world oil and liquefied natural gas passes through this narrow passageway. Now, if we look at this map of the region, you'll see Iran in the middle there, and you'll see along its southern coast, that's the Persian Gulf, and you'll see that very narrow point in the middle where the waterway narrows considerably. That's the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if we zoom in on this map from the website Marine Traffic, which provides live tracking of shipping, you can see those two big clusters of ships. That's what all those red dots are that are anchored to the west of the strait and to the right of the strait. And there are virtually no ships going through. The very few that appear to be going through are mostly Iranian vessels. This was the situation earlier today, and in fact, over the last couple of days, and it's likely to stay like this as long as the war goes on. What happens if ships try to go through? Very simple. There is a very high risk they will get attacked. The UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre, 𝐓𝐿TO, a British government organization, reported on an incident yesterday that is likely to deter any ships from trying to run the strait. And according to the 𝐓𝐿TO, this incident occurred while a ship was passing eastbound through the Straits of Hormuz. A container ship was hit by an unknown projectile just above the waterline, causing a fire in the engine room. The crew had to abandon the ship. They were all accounted for with no injuries. 𝐓𝐿TO also reported that an oil tanker was attacked and set on fire early on Thursday morning in the northern Gulf. Iran's Islamic Republican Guard Corps later said that its naval forces struck an American oil tanker in the northern Persian Gulf early Thursday, setting it ablaze. And the IRGC reiterated its position that under international law and regulations, control over passage to the Strait of Hormuz rests with the Islamic Republic of Iran during wartime. Donald Trump has talked about the U.S. Navy providing escorts through the strait, but this is basically impossible because it would bring U.S. ships within easy reach of Iranian drones and anti-ship missiles. Right now, U.S. ships are staying very far outside the Persian Gulf. Trump has also talked about the U.S. government providing financial backing for shipping insurance, but that does not seem to have done much to calm fears. The Financial Times reports the cost of insuring ships sailing through the Strait of Hormuz has soared 12-fold, even after Donald Trump vowed to backstop trade through the key oil choke point. Ship owners have been quoted millions of dollars for cover to cross the strait or sail in nearby high-risk waters, brokers said, as premiums jumped as high as 3% of the cost of a ship on Wednesday, up from 0.25% before the war. So just to put this in perspective, if you're an owner of a ship that's valued at $100 million, before the war, the insurance premium would have been 0.25% or $250,000 for this ship to go through the straits. Now it's 3%, which means $3 million insurance premium. It's a lot of money. So the impacts of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz have been immediate and will ripple globally. Qatar, which is the third largest producer of liquefied natural gas, and that accounts for about a fifth of global output. On Wednesday, Qatar Energy declared force majeure. This means that it cannot meet its contract obligations to customers. So basically, 1/5 of global LNG production just shut down, and it is unlikely it will resume while the war continues. In fact, impossible. Immediately, European natural gas prices surged 46% to a 3-year high. Already less than a week into this war, India, one of the world's most populous countries, is rationing gas. The position is pretty much the same with crude oil. Kuwait and other oil producers, including Iraq, largely rely on ships to bring their oil to customers. Those ships are not going to be moving. Maersk, the world's biggest global logistics company, announced on Wednesday that it is halting all cargo operations in and out of the UAE, Oman, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, until further notice. This is with immediate notice. Exceptions will be made for critical foodstuff, medicine, and other essential goods. So you can see how dire the situation is there. All of this can have cascading consequences that ripple through global supply chains very quickly and in unforeseen ways. So, for example, here is one report claiming that the enormous spike in shipping insurance costs could severely affect the global shipment of electronics components. So that would have, effects on pretty much all manufacturing. Cars now are mostly computers, for example. In addition to the closure of sea routes, much of the airspace of the region is shut down from Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and across the Gulf. That is not only affecting hundreds of thousands of passengers, but also air cargo, since Gulf-based air carriers are major players in international shipping by air. In the Gulf region, you have Emirates, Etihad, Qatar, and so on. And in the Gulf region, countries like Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, where Dubai is located, have increasingly tried to shift their economies from fossil fuels to tourism, financial services, and real estate. Here you see an ad from Visit Dubai, the official body, showing us the glitzy image that they're trying to sell. And get people to come and buy real estate, influencers to come and put glamorous shots of themselves on social media. In other words, to turn their countries into appealing global brands. All of those industries rely on confidence and trust that these are safe and peaceful countries. And in just a few days, decades of marketing work has gone up in smoke. So these are just some of the economic effects visible in less than a week of this war. What will be the global impact if it continues for weeks or months or longer? What will be the effect, for example, on global inflation and on politics in all of these countries, particularly the United States, where ordinary people are going to be paying the price? Now, Iran knows all of this is very costly, and as Dr. Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran has told us when he's been on our program and many other programs, this is part of Iran's strategy. Iran has made clear that it will do its best to make a war of aggression against it as costly as possible, and things appear to be unfolding now pretty much exactly as he predicted. Now, I want to come back to my article that I mentioned earlier, An Enormous Crime Against Iran. One of my goals with this article was to counter the narrative we're all fed night and day, and you heard Donald Trump say at the beginning of this segment and many, many times after that Iran is an aggressive country run by evil, violent, irrational leaders. And I want to counter that narrative, and I want to counter it with the truth, which is the exact opposite. It is, in fact, Iran that has been the target of American, European, Israeli, and Arab regime aggression for decades, since the 1979 revolution that overthrew the brutal regime of the Shah, which had ruled Iran since it was installed in a CIA coup in 1953. That coup overthrew the democratic, popular, and nationalist government of Mohammad Mossadegh, which wanted to nationalize Iran's oil industry and other resources for the country's own use and the development and well-being of its people. That could not be allowed. In 1980, as Iran was consolidating its post-revolutionary order after overthrowing the brutal US-backed Shah dictatorship, Iraq invaded Iran. But that war was not merely Saddam Hussein's project. It was supported and armed by the United States and European powers and funded by the same Arab regimes that are now complicit in the US-Israeli war of aggression. Even if they say that they are not involved, the United States couldn't do it without their airspace, their territory, their bases, their radars, a whole military infrastructure across the region that John will be telling us about. West Germany, of all countries, was instrumental in Iraq's production of chemical weapons that were used to attack Iranians during the Iran-Iraq war. Even Iran's formidable ballistic missile force has its roots in this period. Iraq's indiscriminate Scud missile attacks on Iran's population centers during the so-called War of the Cities, which killed thousands of Iranian civilians. That's what convinced the country's leaders of the need for an effective defensive deterrent. Iran has not invaded its neighbors. It has not waged wars of conquest. It has not overthrown the leaders of other countries. Its missile strikes have come only after direct attacks, whether the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani in 2019 by the United States or Israeli strikes on Iranian territory. Iran survived 8 years of devastation as a result of the Western and Arab regime-backed Iraqi invasion. Since then, it has faced wave after wave of assassinations and sanctions, calculated to immiserate its population, from denying them cancer treatments to causing crashes of civilian airliners because Iran is banned from importing new aircraft or even spare parts to repair the old planes. Despite Arab regime hostility, Iran has supported Palestinian and Lebanese resistance against Israeli occupation, apartheid, and genocide. This is undoubtedly its main transgression in the eyes of pro-Israel Arabs and their Western sponsors. And of course, instead of describing this as what it is, solidarity with peoples waging just struggles of liberation, it's presented as interference or support for proxies. That's the narrative that's used to demonize Iran's solidarity with the Palestinian people and other people waging anti-colonial struggles in the region. US officials boast that sanctions have collapsed Iran's currency, created economic hardship, and along with covert Israeli and American destabilization efforts, fomented violence. We're seeing the culmination of these decades of aggression in this barbaric war, targeting the Iranian people and their state. Iran is the last stop on Washington and Tel Aviv's regime change train after Iraq, Libya, and Syria, and the installation of docile vassal regimes elsewhere across the region. So, to sum up, this is an existential war for Iran. From its perspective, it has to go all the way to win, to ensure that the cost of attacking it ever again is too high for the US, for Israel, and for regional states that hosted bases being used in these attacks. Iran may have concluded that the only way to ensure its security is to drive the United States out of the region once and for all. From Iran's perspective, it is fight or die. So Iran is not going to stop until it believes its objectives are met. This also makes it an existential war for Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah had to enter the war because if it sits on the sidelines and Iran is defeated, Hezbollah will be finished anyway. Therefore, its leaders must have calculated that they had to join in to maximize Iran's chances of winning. The same logic may hold for Ansarullah in Yemen and resistance groups in Iraq, although we have not seen Ansarullah rejoin hostilities just yet. The US has started a war it had no plan for, except for a plan that didn't work, that the Iranians would rise up and do the job for them. Donald Trump and Israel made a catastrophically bad bet. They can either admit that and retreat, which would rightly be seen as an enormous defeat for them and a victory for Iran, or they can escalate and hope to turn things around. Iran knows it will pay a high cost, but it can afford to stretch this out longer. Relatively speaking, time favors Iran. Escalation looks like the most, I would say, the certain scenario, and it will definitely be costly for all. But at the end of this, the region and the world will be different. For Iran, the stakes are not just survival, but the possibility of a region free of US and Israeli imperialism and dominance. And that is undoubtedly the hope of many people beyond Iran as well.
Thank you so much, Ali. It truly is an existential war. And, when you were showing those ads, promoting tourism in Dubai, this really the absurdity of these U.S. installations around the Gulf region, where for decades the U.S. and Israel have been working hand in glove with these despotic, leaders of these countries to be these cultural Western cultural fantasies, and to see them all collapse in just a matter of days, to realize that the U.S. and Israel have always been paper tigers, especially over the last few decades, where they still think that these plans of we're going to destroy, we're going to decapitate the leadership of one country or another, and that will foment, U.S. imperial designs on that country, that the people will somehow greet the American or Israeli occupiers with flowers and roses, and will do the dirty work for them. That those illusions have been stripped away since October 7th, but in the last 6 days, it's really become more and more clear. I guess before we bring Jon on, can you talk a little bit about how the dynamics of power for the Americans and the Israelis and the Europeans have really been clarified over the last 6 days?
Well, in Trump's video message on Saturday when he launched this war, he mentioned October 7th, and he claimed that Iran had supported October 7th. Of course, Iran said they had no direct knowledge, but Iran is very open that they've been supporting the Palestinian resistance, and it is that support that undoubtedly helped the Palestinian resistance to plan October 7th, which, contrary to the characterization of Trump and Israel and others, was primarily an attack on the Israeli military, an attack on the Israeli infrastructure of apartheid and occupation. So all of what we're seeing, of course, it goes back much further, but the current unfolding of events, starting in Gaza, going through Lebanon, Yemen, and now Syria to a certain extent, and ultimately now to Iran, is a world historic change that was sparked by October 7th. And they know that, and they are trying to rewind the clock. I mean, I think in history, October 7th will be seen as the opening shot of the liberation, not just of Palestine, but potentially of the region from US imperialism and domination. And Iran sees itself as the one fighting for that. They see this as an anti-colonial war, a war to defend their sovereignty and independence. And so this is, in a sense, the final battle. It's the decisive battle that people have been saying, when is that going to come? I think we're in it. I don't know how, it may still unfold in additional rounds. It may not be in one final round, but this is the culmination. And it's either going to be the US and Israel win, or Iran and the people of the region win.
Thank you for that. So and things are changing by the minute. So everything could be. It could be a different world that we wake up to tomorrow, of course. Let's bring Jon on. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Jon.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, you too. I mean, like all of us, you've been glued to your monitors the last 6 days. Talk about where, I mean, the military analysis here, it's unprecedented. I mean, there's so many fronts, that are happening. And give us a thumbnail sketch of what you're going to walk us through.
Yeah, I mean, I think this time Iran was ready for this war, and they have a clear plan, and they're executing it. They're bringing pressure down on the collaborator regimes that are hosting American bases, and they're taking their time. They're not in a rush because, as Ali said correctly, time is on their side in this battle. So I think that what we've seen in the first week was still significant, was more than we saw in the entire 12-day war. So the tempo is higher, but we've seen, I think, over the last few days, a slowing of that into a battle of attrition that I think is the type of war that Iran wants to fight.
Indeed. All right. Well, Ali, why don't you do the honors?
Well, John, I know you've got a lot to show us from across the region, and people are absolutely dying to see it. And
Clamoring.
I'm stretching this out, clamoring. I'm stretching this out to stretch the suspense for them. But take it away, John.
All right, thanks. All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 881 of Israel's genocide in Gaza and day 6 of U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. I am reporting this on the afternoon of Thursday, March 5th. Things are moving quickly, so keep that in mind. We're going to cover the first 5 days of this war, and let's start with the maps off the top, as we usually do. And this complements what Ali was talking about the Strait of Hormuz. You got the choke point of global energy, 20% coming out from Qatar, and 20% of the oil, natural gas from Qatar, and 20% of the oil that the world uses comes through that strait. Ali covered that really well. Just one thing that I'll add to that, as a commander of the naval force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said yesterday that the United States cannot escort ships out of the Strait of Hormuz. Trump cannot send his fleet to extract those stuck in the Gulf or open the Strait of Hormuz. Trump says, "We will escort the ships if necessary. Now is the time for necessity, Mr. Trump. So come and escort your ships." Of course, that puts them well within range of short-range ballistic missiles, anti-ship missiles. And so the Iranians are taunting the Americans to actually escort those ships. That would be a massive undertaking for the Americans, and they do not have the warships in the area right now to do that. So it would involve another buildup. So for now, I think the energy markets are going to spike for sure. And we look at the next one, we can see these bases. These are the main targets of this battle. Each of these countries moving from the shores of Iran out. The UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Jordan, and of course, Israel. Are the main thrusts of it. The U.S. has said that it has dropped 2,000 bombs in the first 30 hours of this war. 1,000 were in the first 13 hours of the war. They've struck more than 2,000 targets. The Israeli Air Force said this morning that they've dropped over 5,000 bombs in strikes. The Iranians say 500 ballistic missiles and more than 2,000 drones have been launched. 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the defense secretary, outlined the mission. He said the mission of Epic Fury is laser focused: destroy Iranian offensive missiles, destroy Iranian missile production, destroy the Navy and other security infrastructure. So this is a regime change operation. And as Ali pointed out, Trump has 47 years of grievances against Iran that they're using to justify this regime change. If we look at the next map, you can see the bases that have been targeted. And these are the key bases in the UAE. The key bases there, Al Udeid in Kuwait is the CENTCOM main air base, and then beside it there in Bahrain is the 5th Fleet, which is the naval command for the entire region. CENTCOM covers basically everything that you see in that map and a little bit more. But you can see also targeting in Kuwait. There's a significant force in Kuwait. The numbers in between Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar are more than 40,000 American troops in those bases. But the number of military bases and installations that have been targeted by the Iranians are in the dozens. They've also hit diplomatic and strategic facilities like embassies. CIA stations are all in those embassies and the CIA. said this week that they are evacuating all of their CIA offices that are in, usually they're in the embassies, particularly because the one in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, was hit. And Saudi Arabia also hosts that key air base, Prince Sultan Air Base, that you see down in the south there. And in Jordan, Muwafaq al-Salti Air Base, that hosts the American Expeditionary Wing. And we saw in my report last week about the buildup that the U.S. is concentrating their forces on that air base rather than having them all spread out. So the air defense tactic is to concentrate their troops on a few of the bases and then use the carriers that are out, the carrier that is in the Mediterranean and its guided missile destroyers as basically air defense for Israel. If we look at the next map, again, you can see the targets all around. Those are both sides targets as of yesterday. And you can see just how close those Gulf states are and the American bases are to Iran. And that is a huge advantage in weaponry. They do not need their long-range ballistic missiles. They can use shorter range ballistic missiles. And that's the same for traveling the Strait of Hormuz. They can pull out anti-ship ballistic and cruise missiles to hit from close range. Those are devastating weapons at that range. And the Americans don't want any part of that. They haven't wanted that in the Yemen front as well. They keep their carriers as far out of distance as they can, out of distance at least of the short range. So they're off in the Arabian Sea there, down in the bottom right of the map. And the other carrier, the USS Ford, is up off the coast of Israel. It's out in the Mediterranean. It's not in Israel. There was a lot of misreporting that it was coming into dock in Israel, but it is staying offshore. Again, Hezbollah has anti-ship capabilities as well on the Lebanon coast that you can see there up in the upper left of that map. So really is a regional war, and these maps show that as clear as day. The next slide here, we're going to start with the school massacre, because, of course, this is the way Israel fights its wars, and the Americans do too. The massacre at this school that was sort of captured, I think, with this photo here that we're looking at, a backpack with a child's blood on it. 168 schoolgirls aged 7 to 12 were killed, along with 15 of their teachers. There was 2 strikes on the school in southeast Iran. In the town of Minab. 6 buildings, including the school and the clinic, were destroyed. We can see on the next slide here just the totality of this horror. These are the graves for the children being dug. And as they always say in Gaza, the smallest coffins are always the heaviest. And you can see that with those small graves there that we're looking at, a row upon row of graves to bury more, including the teachers, more than 175 people. And one more like this will show you the funeral on that day. And then the funeral on that day, despite Trump saying, don't go outside your house, it's scary, there's bombs falling, you don't want to be out there, there was a massive funeral demonstration for these schoolgirls, showing just, the kind of resolve that I don't think the Americans expected in this war. But the street scenes of those funeral marches were incredible under the scale of bombing that's happening. 7,000 bombs, according to the US and Israelis, at a minimum. And there was tens of thousands of people out on the streets for those mourning that funeral. We'll take a look at the next slide, because the war began with these 2 strikes, the strike on the school and then the strike on the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And he was killed at a meeting. So the key to the way the war started is it started on the first day of the work week in Iran, and it started at 9:30 in the morning. So when people were all out in the streets and people were meeting in their offices in the National Security Council in Iran, and they Americans and Israelis managed to kill in that assassination not just Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, but also the commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, the Minister of Defense, the head of the Military Council, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force, as well as the Deputy Intelligence Minister in that. Again, perfidy by the Israelis, because the Iranians believed that they were still in negotiations. After the last round of negotiations just last week, negotiations were supposed to continue, and they had plans to meet again. And so again, Iran trusting its enemy to be honorable, which we know from 2.5 years of war with Israel is not the case. This is a poster you're looking at here that was put out by the PFLP's Abu Ali Mustafa brigades that calls Khamenei a martyr on the road to Al-Quds and Palestine. And also the Qassam brigade spoke about the martyred leader, and this is what they said. The martyred leader, Ali Khamenei, represented the primary supporter of the axis of resistance, Palestine, and its fighters. Indeed, all the Islamic Republic has provided for decades in terms of support and backing for our people and our resistance, at the heart of which are the Al-Qassam brigades, was by his direct decision and under his full patronage. This great support and backing for the path of resistance constituted an essential and important factor that contributed to the development of the resistance and its tactics, leading to the great creativity it displayed in Al-Aqsa flood and the legendary steadfastness for 2 full years in the face of the most powerful forces of injustice in the region. So saluted by all of the Palestinian resistance factions. Of course, people who watch this show know that would be an obvious thing that would happen from all of the factions, from the leftists all the way across the political spectrum of the resistance groups. We can see next here a promo that was put out by Khamenei's Office of Preservation and Publication for the works of Ali Khamenei. And they put out this missile and drone launch that you can see. And he says here, "We are not the initiators of war. However, anyone who shows their greed and seeks to attack or cause harm will face a decisive blow from the Iranian nation." And here we're seeing buried missile silos, racks of Shahid drones, and then attacks here on the various installations of the Americans in the region. I will go through these operations one by one, but we're seeing them now. Hits in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, across the region. Ali Larijani, the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, the top security figure right now in Iran, said, "As in the past 300 years, Iran did not start this war, and our braved armed forces are not engaged in any attack except for defense. We will fiercely defend ourselves and our 6,000-year-old civilization, regardless of the costs, and we will make the enemy regret their miscalculations. Iran, unlike the United States, is prepared for a long war." Also, just to note, Ali Khamenei had a fatwa against nuclear weapons for many, many years, decades even, and him saying that was in the preamble of the JCPOA. So again, putting lie to the American propaganda, as always, but we just cover it here. So we'll go to number 10 here. We'll show map of the missile range here, from their short range missiles all the way to their more sophisticated high-end long range solid fuel and advanced missiles down at the bottom, which according to the IRGC have not been used yet. They said they have been saving them and using old stock, but you can see with the concentric rings going out from 300 kilometers out to 2,000 kilometers that they have missiles for every purpose in this war, for each distance, for each outcome. So a significant missile force that has been built up over more than a generation and is being put into use today. The next map is another one showing their missiles again with a map that you can see the distance, all of it well within range. And they're also within range of drones, which they have been using significantly. And we saw that in the previous 3 Iranian exchanges of fire. True Promise 1, 2, and 3, and this is True Promise 4 that we are in right now. If you look at the next slide, you can see some launches from underground missile bases. And again, this is the key, because the Israelis and the Americans have been showing us lots of footage of launchers being knocked out, because lots of them are truck launches, and they're easier to track once they have been launched. But when you see these kind of underground facilities, these are very difficult for Israel to get. They don't know where they are, unlike the nuclear facilities where they knew where they were, and had previous interactions with the United Nations inspectors and whatnot. These missile bases are not known to the Israelis. There's the Shahed drones. There's their longer range liquid fuel missiles. And you saw a bunch of launches of solid fuel missiles as well. Solid fuel missiles are a lot better because you don't have to load them. You don't have to load the fuel. You don't have to have workers out there exposed while you're loading. And so the solid fuel advanced missiles, which is what we will be seeing in the coming days and weeks, are preferable on the battle space. And these are all being, these are missiles that cost maybe, high hundreds of thousands, early millions, early 1 millions to make, and the interceptors that are knocking them down that are not built as fast are in the $3 million to $27 million range. So there is a massive discrepancy in the outlay of costs in this war, which will also over time be a damning factor for the U.S. and its stocks. We won't get into too much of that on this show right now, because the first week of the war, we don't need to worry too much about missile stockpiles and interceptor stockpiles. But I've talked about it on this show a number of times when we were covering Yemen, that the missile math is not... it's very finite. The interceptors are expensive. The military buildup for this war was very fast. It wasn't planned, so they didn't have chance to, increase domestic production, which is something that almost can't really happen in the U.S. the way the economy is shaped, and is particularly the military-industrial complex is shaped. So these things will all be significant as the days go on. Iranians, 500 ballistic missiles, 2,000 drones, and IRGC said 40% have been aimed at Israel and 60% at U.S. bases and consulates throughout the region. We will go to 13 now. I think, yes. Okay, so here's some strikes on Israel. Again, there's massive censorship in Israel. We're watching, this is a news broadcaster that we've seen footage come from before. Obviously, one of the producers is sneaking this footage out, but we have seen off this balcony a number of shots. And for people listening, we're watching the streaks in the sky and the massive blast hitting Tel Aviv. And of course, they tell you in Tel Aviv that these aren't landing and that they have 100% interception rates. In fact, the next video that is going to come in this series, this one here from NBC, they're on the air talking about how the Iron Dome gets all the rockets and gets all the missiles. And then this one comes right while they're talking. I cut their talking out for the same reason Ali cut Netanyahu, because you don't need to hear it. But they don't know what they're talking about. They're talking about the wrong air defense systems. But as they were bragging about how good they were, a missile came right down and smacked, and then they had to talk about that missile and try and figure out what was going on. And you can see the on the ground, the censorship in Israel has been remarkable. At the threat of jail time will do it, I guess, for people. Also, there's a nationalistic element in it that they don't want to be. I assume that there's a nationalistic element of not wanting to be shown to be humiliated in front of the world. But for whatever it is, the number of videos coming out from Israel compared to the 12-day war, which itself was shrouded in censorship, is even less this time around. This next slide is going to have audio in it.
נפילה שם, נפילה. הנה עוד אחד, נפילה שם. יואו!
So that's from on the ground in Israel. These are all targeting of Israel. At the beginning, what you heard was cheering from children in Gaza. And you can note that throughout this report that each of the countries have the missiles falling on them, ostensibly, are cheering those missiles. We'll see that again when we cut to Bahrain. I think we have audio in the next slide as well. We also have a siren. So be aware that there's going to be a siren, but this is the sound of what the war sounds like in Beersheba in southern Israel. So this was from Monday. It was the 11th wave of Operation True Promise. The IRGC is releasing their field reports in waves that they talk about. And this wave included Beersheba, where there's an IDF industrial communications complex in the city. And that barrage, wave 11, targeted 20 sites across Israel. So spreading out the attacks, keeping the entire country moving to shelters. These are strategies rather than using advanced missiles. They've been saying they're using their old stock up and keeping people on the run throughout Israel from the north to the south. And that is clearly part of the strategy of this. We have, again, audio in this next slide, but we are going to now go to Bahrain. So this is the targeting of the 5th Fleet, the U.S. Naval Command in Manama, Bahrain. Number 16.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Okay.
Red warning. Target shelter immediately. Shelter in place. Triple red warning. Target shelter immediately. Shelter in place.
So as you can see, the Bahrainis don't seem to have much problem with the U.S. bases being targeted. Of course, in each of these countries, there's movements to get rid of these bases that are stamped out by the royal families that run these countries as their own personal fiefdoms. So that is Bahrain, 5th Fleet. This is a critical site for the Americans, overseeing the entire region between the 5th Fleet and Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Forms the real core of the U.S. presence in the region. We got audio in the next one again. This is again the 5th Fleet.
مسيرة اضرب 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 عدل.
So the same things you hear in Gaza, in Bahrain as well. And this next one also has audio in. This is the targeting of hotels. And let me just say before we show this, that this is the targeting of hotels of U.S. troops. The IRGC said, the flight of cowardly U.S. soldiers from regional bases, they're taking refuge in hotels in host countries, and their criminal army's use of civilian facilities in the Persian Gulf countries as cover do not escape the intelligence monitoring of the IRGC. So we'll take a look at 18. And you can actually hear that on the first one I showed you 3 back when they were in the car. That's American soldiers in the car. In many cases, these videos are coming from American soldiers while they're in their hotels, and that's why you're hearing people speaking English like that, and in that car while they're being shocked. So that was 18. We have a lot of media today, so thanks, Tamara, for working through this all with me. So this is the burning of those facilities after. Again, they've been targeted numerous times, but this is what you see when you drive by on the highway of the Fifth Fleet. And there's times where people wouldn't have thought this was possible to see this. These bases have been built, particularly they were built for, they started in the Gulf War, in the first Gulf War in the 1990s, but of course the post 9/11 war on terror expanded these bases considerably, and they were not popular locally. So that's 19. And just to give you a sense of how the IRGC writes up their field reports, like we've described the Qassam Brigades doing. So this is how the IRGC does it. They say the 18th wave of Operation True Promise 4 has begun. We remind the arrogant enemy the movements of American soldiers in Qatar and Bahrain and their use of non-military facilities in Persian Gulf countries are not hidden from us. No amount of air defense systems will help you. So that's how that was announced before those drones were launched. So it's almost like an early warning, but effectively telling exactly what is being hit. And I think we'll see that in these next few. Is this 20? Okay, this is the continued burning. So those two, 19 and 20, go together with these burnings of these facilities that we're seeing, that the U.S. is saying they're intercepting, or Bahrain is saying they're intercepting all of these, and they're just clearly not. We will see with the next slide, satellite imagery. You can see the base. We're seeing the base there, and then before and after of the base, clearly showing a headquarters that was hit in this base. 2 satellite communications terminals were destroyed. Several large buildings at the base were also destroyed and extensively damaged, the New York Times said. This is New York Times satellite analysis, and you can clearly see the damage. So these are pinpoint strikes, and that's the thing is about the drones. They you could make them pinpoint. That's what they do. They hit right where they're supposed to go, GPS tracked, or to get them exactly on their topic, or Russian, in a lot of cases, Russian GPS is being used. So you can see the destruction there. And the next one, you can see Al Udeid Air Base, again, satellite communications. These are the 2 key bases to repeat. And so when you're knocking out the satellite communications at these bases, you're knocking down the capacity for the network connectivity that the entire American missile defense program and defense in general runs on. So clearly the first targets of this war were those satellite terminals and communication terminals. Again, we saw that with the early days of the Hezbollah joining the war after October 7th, knocking out Israel's network connectivity. These are very standard and important first day of war attacks. And just to give you a sense, the UAE says that they have endured more than 800 drones and 186 ballistic missiles. So more than 1,000 targeting just the UAE. itself, and it has a major U.S. air base there too, Al Fahra Air Base. In Qatar, they say 100 ballistic missiles, 3 cruise missiles, 24 drones. Kuwait was 180 ballistic missiles, 400 drones, 100 missiles in Bahrain, and 76 drones, and dozens in Saudi Arabia, which we will see in these next 2 slides. This is the Prince Sultan Saudi Air Base. That's another Al Udeid. And yeah, here's the Prince Sultan. So this is Al Udeid. We'll go to the next one. That shows more destruction of those satellite terminals. This is the Prince Sultan base that you can see again, structural damage. Large plumes of smoke coming up from them. So direct hits on these bases. 26, we're going to take a look at Jordan now. This is the key U.S. expeditionary base, Muwafaq al-Salti, and you can see there clearly a direct ballistic missile hit on that air base. And again, people watching that closely. The next one shows you a problem that we've seen a number of times, but you can see over to the right there, that's a misfiring interceptor that's just being fired into the Jordanian community, along with the shrapnel that because the drones are mostly shot out of the sky using fighter jets and helicopters. So they blast them out of the sky and the pieces fall all over Jordan. And that's part of the deal, I guess, with the king. And again, at this airbase, it's key because this is a concentration of U.S. forces on top of the Expeditionary Air Wing that's already based at that base in Jordan. I showed you the map, the satellite imagery of that base in Jordan in last week's show, and there wasn't enough room for any more airplanes. It was all bristling with fighter jets. So when these it's one thing to concentrate your defenses, but when your defenses are concentrated and something gets through, it's going to be a big mess. So they are expending extraordinary amounts of interceptors to try to prevent that from happening. This next one, 28, this is going to have audio in as well. This is a strike on a U.S. base in Kuwait, and you can hear the U.S. soldiers commenting on the strike here in this one.
Truck.
So I think it's a joke because he's looking at a bunch of MRAPs there, but the soldier says, "That's my truck." And these there has been 6 U.S. soldiers killed on these bases in these attacks. These are the only casualties that the Americans have admitted to. DropSite has done some reporting that that they believe the number is being suppressed significantly. But we will have to see in the coming days when the honesty of casualties comes out, because we're particularly not hearing about wounded soldiers. And also, just to say, those drone strikes that were hitting the city, that were hitting those hotels, those are not killing locals. The number of locals killed in each of these countries is in the single digits throughout this war, and we're not clear who they are, if they're on the base, if they're base workers. All of that stuff is still all fuzzy at this point, but we will keep track of that, of course. And the next slide, you could see the significant damage at the Ali Al Salam base in Kuwait. You could see again satellite dishes, radar domes, all the specific targets of those. So they're taking drones, precision drones that are about they're basically the price of your car. They go the speed of your car. They're roughly the size of your car. That's a good way to understand them. But they're very accurate with their strikes. And so they're using the drones to flood the air defenses, waste air defenses, but also to get in and knock out these critical nodes of the air defense system. And then 30, I think we can see the embassy here in Kuwait on fire. The embassies have all been evacuated, but also the CIA bases attached to the embassies have also been evacuated because they were hit in Riyadh the other day, and the CIA announced that everybody was to evacuate. Now, for this next one, we're going to have audio in here because this is the shooting down of 3 U.S. F-15s that were downed by apparently Kuwaiti friendly fire. All 3 of them right in a row here, and we're going to watch each one of them. These are F-15E Strike Eagles falling from the sky. You could see the ejection of the pilots there. According to CENTCOM, all 6 pilots survived. When they reached the ground, they were treated, all were treated well by the population when they landed. You could see the ejection from that one as well. So 3 more lost fighter jets. We know they lost 3 during the Yemen battles as well. And the key to this is not just that it's an accident that happens. The key is that it's during active combat. It's when missile drone combo attacks are happening, layered attacks are happening, incoming, that creates the confusion, that creates the friendly fire, or in the case of Yemen, where the aircraft carrier had to do a sharp turn and therefore lost the plane overboard. But that's not just happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the moment of a complex strike that's happening directly on these forces. So they are friendly fire, but they're very much a forced error, if we can use a tennis term there. So there was also reporting today, I won't get into that, but there may have been a 4th American fighter jet shot down in Iran. There's early reporting about that. We'll have to wait to confirm all of that. And all of this stuff takes a lot to confirm because, as I'm sure people watching know, there has been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, purposeful misguidance of what's going on as part of the propaganda campaign happening here. Let's take a look at Dubai now. 32. This is IRGC. I think we have audio in this one as well for 32. So that was the U.S. embassy as a consulate in Dubai. I believe that it was a consulate, not an embassy, but an emptied one. And again, Ali talked about these countries as brands. These kind of attacks definitely take the shine off of that. You'll see one more angle of it here coming up right now. We're watching a street level view of panicked people, and there's the burning consulate shown from people driving down the highway. And then the next slide, you can see that the Ministry of Defense of the UAE has been putting these out. They say they have detected 186 ballistic missiles launched towards them. They say they have intercepted 172 of them. Not sure how good these stats are, but they're putting them out, and it's interesting for at least what they are seeing coming at them. You're talking about 8 cruise missiles and 812 Shahed drones fired at them. So more than 1,000 projectiles fired at the UAE alone in this case. So significant focus on the UAE as well. Now let's take a look at some of the drones. The drones, the IRGC Aerospace Force has downed a number of drones. I attempted to do a count of them because to see if we could match them up. But we have footage like this footage clearly here of an Israeli Hermes 900. There's an Elbit drone, one less Elbit drone. Here comes another Elbit drone blasted out of the sky. And then there's a third one here that's an Israel Aerospace Industries Heron drone that you can tell the difference between them because of the back wing that you'll see. So these are being knocked out of the sky every day in Iran. We see footage of them on the ground. We've seen some of this footage from the missile cam. That's what you're seeing here. These look a lot like the weapon that was used in Yemen. It's not totally clear, but it seems to be the same, the 358 that the Yemenis were using to down a couple of dozen MQ-9 Reapers. So far, these are all Israeli drones that we've seen drop. Although the Iraqi resistance reported that they got an MQ-9 Reaper. If they did, I'm sure we will be seeing that in due time. The Iranians, and number 35 has two more drones coming out of the sky. You can see them dropping here. Again, it's a Hermes falling out of the sky, and then there's going to be another one on the ground. And we've seen more than a dozen for sure separate drops. The Iranian army is also doing air defense. They do an integrated air defense with the IRGC, and they put their number of drones down in the many dozens, something like 30 through these days, but difficult to verify because we don't have footage of all of them. The Ansar Allah movement always gave us footage to match their claims. So we'll see if this reporting crystallizes more in the coming weeks. But you can see it that drop down again over a city in southern Iran. And then this is the Hermes 900. This appears to have been taken down by electronic warfare because it is more or less perfectly intact. And the IRGC said that it was under the control of the fighters of the aerospace force of the IRGC. And there you can see its bomb loaded out, hadn't used them yet on this particular drone, but definitely not seeing this on news that I'm watching. So I thought I'd bring you this angle, as I always do. And then this was an interesting story because the US has actually cloned the Shahed drone and have their own. And they announced number 36 here. They announced their own, the launch, historic first. They said this was on day 2 that it says we're looking at a CENTCOM tweet press release. It says CENTCOM's Task Force Scorpion Strike for the first time in history is using one-way attack drones in combat during Operation Epic Fury. These low-cost drones modeled after Iran's Shahed drones are now delivering American-made retribution. So again, blustery American military announcements, followed by, let's take a look at the next clip. It only took some few hours before the Iraqis were picking apart one of these Lucas drones, low-cost drones that look exactly like the Iranian drones and are run on Starlink. You could see the Starlink satellite dangling off there. So that was less than 24 hours turnaround from them boasting about retribution to Iraqis in the desert laughing and having fun with the drone, trying to decide what to do, if it can fit in their pickup truck or not. Sort of like the footage we used to see in Yemen when the drones would down. So that's a remarkable little turnaround there for their copycat drones. And now Hezbollah joined the war. I think Hezbollah joined the war this week, but the war was going to join Hezbollah. So I think that they got out in front of it. There hasn't been a ceasefire. The ceasefire has been in many ways more fraudulent in Lebanon than it is in Gaza, even, which is hard to say because it's been brutal in Gaza. But in Lebanon, the number of violations is in the tens of thousands, and the number of Hezbollah commanders, operatives, soldiers killed is more than 500. There's daily strikes. And this war was not going to let Israel was not going to let Hezbollah be on the sidelines of this war. So Hezbollah joined the war 2 days ago, and immediately we get clips like this, number 38. We see a mark of a tank there in the distance, and again, this is at the top of the Galilee Panhandle, and that's a Cornet anti-tank guided missile that's going to be launched, and a direct hit you're going to see as it spools its way on target. This is a remarkable shot, multiple kilometer shot. I didn't do the calculation myself, but I saw a calculation from a source that said that this was 5 kilometers, which would make sense. And again, this is an area that Hezbollah is not supposed to be, let alone they're clearly, the first shot was clearly by their anti-tank marksman, because that is a long distance shot and it hit perfectly. The Israelis have said that there has been several injuries inside tanks that have been hit by anti-tank guided missiles. So Hezbollah is back, 36 operations in the first 2 days, and they're on their way to that total again today. And of course, the Islamic Hezbollah said in this on this post of this video, they said that of the field report, they said the Islamic resistance is committed to defending its land and people, especially as the Israeli enemy crosses boundaries within its crimes. Its response targeted military sites, unlike the enemy, which targets civilians. So Hezbollah saying we target military sites, and they have rocket and drone attacks on Israeli bases all across the front line, which now includes Syria, because the Israelis are occupying Syria now as well. So they were targeted there by Hezbollah as well. And number 39, we're going to see the Iraqi resistance has been, this is an underground missile base. You can see Nasrallah, Qasem Soleimani. You can see their missiles in their underground bunkers as well. And the Iraqi resistance joined immediately. They didn't need any prompting. They joined the war in the first minutes of the war and began hammering the American air base at Erbil in northern Iraq, as well as the 2 other American air bases, Ain al-Assad in western Iraq, and then they have a base, the U.S. base at Baghdad Airport. So that's the Erbil airport that you're seeing, air base that you're seeing in flames there from the Iraqi resistance. And just one more, number 40. Of all of this, after all of this, the U.S. sent out this notice this week. This is from the State Department that says security updates for Americans in the Middle East. Depart now via commercial means due to serious safety risks. And it lists the countries: Bahrain, Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen. So essentially the Americans saying, we're too busy protecting Israel right now to worry about our people in the region. We sprung the war on them so fast that they didn't have reasonable chance to get their families out of the region. And they say to them, depart now, and you're on your own. Although I did hear yesterday on the news that instead of just hanging up on people calling the embassies, that there's now a recorded message. So just real kind of a last thing to just say that the focus seems to be for the America Firsters on the Americans. That was all a big fraud. So this has been the Resistance Report for day 6 of the war in Iran.
Woo! Take a breath there, John. Thank you so much.
Can I just say
Yeah.
from here in Jordan that I'm not rushing back to the U.S. And the funny thing about, I mean, it's not funny. That there's people who would have been visiting and who need to get back for various reasons, but there are no flights. I mean, there are almost all airlines have stopped flying. So the very few that are still flying, I won't name names because it's of questionable safety. The European Aviation Safety Agency has said that it is unsafe to fly in the skies of most of these countries at any altitude. But, for those few that are flying, there are no seats available, as you can imagine. British Airways has canceled most of its flights to the Gulf, but it's organizing special flights out of Muscat, the capital of Oman, because people are driving from all over the region, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from Bahrain, from wherever, from the UAE, multiple hours to Oman to get these special BA flights that are also full. So this is the chaos that they have, it's a tiny part of the chaos they've unleashed, but it just gives you a sense.
Yeah, I mean, just the complete breakdown of infrastructure. It's already putting several economies of major Western countries into tailspins.
I mean, they did it to them. I mean, they did it to
Absolutely.
themselves because you cut yourself off from Russian gas.
Yep.
And you bet on American natural gas, which is very expensive and has to be shipped and is in short supply. Now the price is going up anyway, and you don't think the Americans are going to screw you for every dollar they can get? Of course they are.
Of course they will.
And then the Qatari gas and all the Gulf oil is offline. And from what John showed us, the idea that there's any defense against the drones and missiles is absurd. It's all laying wide open. And I don't know, John, I do not believe those figures coming out of the Gulf countries about either how many projectiles were fired at them or how many they shot down. It sounds a lot to me like Ukraine, who put out these figures all the time. We shot down 1,000 Russian drones. That's not credible. I don't think so. But nonetheless, what we're seeing is more than enough to tell you that they are screwed.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah,
it's only just starting.
I mean, it's interesting. I was looking at that footage, John, that you showed of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞, or was it the Hermes drone that was safely downed? Very delicately. Is it possible that now, these vaunted, Israeli US made pieces of equipment that cost however many, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars each,
30 million each,
thank you, can now be reverse engineered by the Iranians, Allah, Hezbollah? I mean, what kind of dent does that put into the global arms and surveillance tech industry at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. I mean, I just showed you the Americans doing it too. They captured a Shahed intact and they cloned it.
Yeah.
And so those kind of battlefield prizes are very significant. We covered that with Hezbollah, where they used the Almas missile that was essentially a cloned Israeli missile that was captured during the 2006 war, and captured completely intact, and it set up a new generation of capacity. So yeah, it's very significant. The drones coming down is significant, and it does seem the numbers are significant that are being taken down.
Yeah.
It also shows that it's a lie that the Israelis are flying over Tehran, which is what they've been saying, is that they're penetrating deep into Iran. They're absolutely not. They're firing standoff weapons from the borders, and they're sending drones overhead. So
right.
More lies. It's very difficult to get. There's so many lies. More lies than time.
Yeah. Deliberately. I mean, that's, every time any Israeli official or soldier opened their mouth. It's a lie. Let alone their entire propaganda machine for trying to, I don't know, pander to their own, constituency, their own people who are spending now a week inside these bunkers with limited or broken bathroom facilities, limited food and medicine. The Israeli government told their people to go back to work today. I don't know if that's if that was heated, but it seems to be that there is also, a lot of civil unrest within the entity because of this. That, of course, they didn't ever factor in or believe that could ever happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to make a couple of points about this war, about a couple of things that have struck me. The first one is about the intelligence, and the second one is about the martyrdom of the Iranian leader. We saw in those videos that John showed from the Gulf countries, from if we can call them the Western oil and gas colonies, built on the backs of slaves, largely from South Asia. The drones that were and the projectiles that were targeting those buildings, the high rises in the Gulf countries, look. You pointed out yourself, John, how they were often filmed by American military personnel. They looked to me to be, this is partly speculation, but they look very, very highly targeted. They look, and that is clearly an intelligence-led targeting. A lot has been said, and a lot of ink has been spilled over the intelligence victories of Israel in Lebanon and in Iran. In terms of the elimination of layers of the respective leaderships of Hezbollah and Iran, and Mossad infiltration of Iran, and that's not it's not entirely wrong. That is absolutely true, that there is a large degree of Mossad infiltration in Lebanon and Iran, and the assassinations of military and political leaderships has absolutely happened. But we've seen far less or practically zero acknowledgement of the intelligence victories of Iran so far in this war. And I think, that is something that should really be acknowledged for any realistic appraisal of the situation. And the second thing that really struck me was the martyrdom of Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. And it was very striking, and a lot of Iranians have noted the fact of where he was assassinated, and the fact that he wasn't hiding in an underground bunker, and he wasn't, very similar to the martyrdom in some ways of Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas, although he was more of a military than a political leader, in the sense that he was actually fighting with a rifle on the front lines again against the Israeli occupation soldiers, which was again was really a shock when it happened, with all this propaganda that was kind of spewed out by Israel and Westerners about how he was hiding in a hole somewhere, surrounded by hostages as human shields and so forth. All those things were lies, and he was literally fighting on the front lines, as we covered at the time in depth, with a literal rifle in his hand, and he fought to his last breath. In a similar way, in a more of a political struggle, Khamenei was fighting as a political fighter, as the head of state, as the leader of the country. And this is, it's been really striking to me how he chose to stay fulfilling his role to the end. And this really seems to have had a absolutely electrifying effect on the Iranian population. Ali's made the point on Twitter a lot over the last week of how Donald Trump keeps calling for Iranians to go out onto the streets. Well, they have, but it's had exactly the opposite direction that he wants to happen. And it's far too easy for Westerners to believe this kind of image of portrayed by within the Iranian, anti-government elements of the Iranian diaspora, and believe that we should center those Iranian voices, and we're getting into the whole kind of script that we've seen with the kind of Al-Qaeda war against Syria and so forth. But it's been incredibly striking to me that the martyrdom and how he chose to die of Khamenei has had this incredible effect. And some people are even talking about a kind of rejuvenation of the Iranian Revolution, and we'll see how that plays out.
And on that, Asa, at least on social media, you have this extreme demonization of Khamenei from the Western media, from obviously the US administration, from Israel. But on social media, you see all of these clips of Khamenei circulating, which show him as, this very gentle figure, this very thoughtful and learned figure, compassionate figure. Of course, no human being is perfect, but the image that is circulating of him is so different from the demonization that we've seen. And I think the reality is so different from the demonization. You just compare sort of the reverence people have for him, clearly the reverence people have for him, and the gentle way he spoke, the thoughtful way he spoke, his political thinking, which was very long-term, with just the thuggish, murderous way that the US leaders in particular, but also the Israeli and the Western leaders more generally speak. And it is such an enormous contrast. And I think it's a contrast that's not lost on the people in this region, especially, leave aside the West. But I think even in the West, it's starting to penetrate, just in the way that after October 7th, you would have expected, and I think the Israelis expected, the ultra demonization of Palestinians. And what happened is that support for Palestine across the West is stronger than ever. And I think we're seeing, or we're likely to see, a similar effect when it comes to Iran, because nobody can look at the images from Tehran. No honest person can look at them and say it's justified what they're doing. Just the indiscriminate bombardment. I mean, the repetition of the scenes we saw from Gaza over the past 2.5 years. And I think this gives the lie to the idea that, over time, Western governments became disgusted with Israel. And, they at the beginning, they said after October 7th, we'll support Israel, but then Israel went too far. No, not at all. They saw everything Israel did in Gaza, and they said, yes, we want to do that too, but we want to do it.
They said it was very good. Over time, they became more enamored of Israel.
They became more enamored of Israel, while the people are becoming more revolted at Israel. So this is world historical in the sense of the gap that it's opening up between the elites, or the Epstein class, as people are calling them, and ordinary people everywhere who look at this with horror. I mean, even in the United States, Marjorie Taylor Greene, we've talked about her before, the former congresswoman, big Trump supporter, big MAGA supporter, is speaking with, it's not possible to fake that outrage. Real, genuine outrage and disgust, and saying this is not, I was fooled, I was taken in. And I think that's a more widespread reaction. Yeah. And the hypocrisy of those who claim to be supporting Iranian protesters and who keep exaggerating the numbers, like Iran supposedly killed 35,000 people in 2 days or 3 days or a week in January. Yeah. And nobody has seen any evidence of that. They're putting that number about, but they're silent in the face of these barbaric massacres
or they try to say that it that it was the Iranian government who bombed the girls' school. I
Yeah.
mean, these mental gymnastics that people, especially in the Western diaspora, are attempting to make.
It's
In
exactly the
order to
same lies that
demonize,
we saw in Syria, where they said that the Assad regime is committing a genocide against the Syrian people. It was a total lie. They're saying 30,000 people were killed by the so-called Iranian regime. What we actually saw was a Mossad CIA, campaign of riots and
which they admitted
insurgency.
openly.
Yeah, you had the former head of the CIA saying openly that Mossad agents were
And you
marching
had,
with the
Mike Huckabee.
rioters, and he called them
Yeah,
rioters.
exactly. Yeah,
You know,
Mike
so-
Huckabee saying, Iran, our glorious CIA agents and Mossad agents or whatever are walking hand in hand through the streets of
Yeah.
Tehran.
The masks are really truly off.
It really is. It really is. I we should probably wrap up. We just have a couple of minutes left, but I just wanted to look, just briefly talk about the situation in South Lebanon. Both John and Ali, you covered this, but it looks like, people in South Lebanon and in Beirut are getting orders from the Israeli military to leave immediately. There is just acceleration of threats, really just unbelievably genocidal threats against the people in Lebanon. Where do we see this going? What should we be looking out for in the next few days?
I think Hezbollah is a real wild card. Their position in this battle and the proximity to Israel, if they were to join the missile war in the way that it's going on, they're a significant factor. And the thing about Hezbollah is that whatever they've been degraded to whatever degree, what hasn't been degraded is they're on the ground fighters that are going to meet the Israelis as they move into Lebanon. That is that's the fighting core of Hezbollah right now. And I have to imagine that they have been wanting to get involved for the past period, because it's clear that their ceasefire is a fraud.
Yeah.
And the group can only take so many assassinations. This could not be something that is a permanent condition of existence in Lebanon, that your fighters are assassinated every single day. Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about Hezbollah's role in this, and unfortunate things to be said about the Lebanese government outlawing Hezbollah, making them illegal, making their armed wing illegal. Those kind of things at a moment like this are just deeply unfortunate.
To say the
I can
least.
be less polite than you, John.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, it's
shocking.
It's not shocking. It is a stab in the back. It is unconscionable, but it's also not surprising. That's why this Lebanese government was installed with the approval of the United States and Israel. And that's being said openly in Lebanon. I follow a lot of Lebanese commentators, and they see it clearly that this government has been collaborating essentially with Israel and the United States since the so-called ceasefire back in whenever it was, September of, remind me, John, of the date, but 24, yeah. So you have this debate in Lebanon where the accusation against Hezbollah from the people who support the government is, oh, you've dragged the country to destruction. You had no right to do, this is the discourse that is also deployed against the Palestinian resistance by the Palestinian collaborators in the Palestinian Authority. But John made a really important point in his presentation, which is that if Hezbollah didn't enter the war was coming for Hezbollah. And that is exactly right, I think. The sense of inevitability was that if, after Iran, after they toppled Iran, the US and Israel would have turned on Hezbollah. There was no question of that. And no ceasefire agreement would have stopped them. Nothing would have stopped them. No good behavior by Hezbollah would have stopped them. So Hezbollah has to be looking at this and saying, if not now, when?
Yeah.
If we still have all these weapons, what are we waiting for? If this isn't the moment, it's never going to be. And as I said, you know, Hezbollah is not Iran's proxy. That's the simplistic Zionist narrative that we hear. Hezbollah is an indigenous movement rooted in the people of Lebanon, particularly in the south, defending their own land. They're not a proxy, but they do enjoy and require a great deal of support from Iran. So if Iran went down, Hezbollah would go down. So they have to fight.
Yeah.
They have to join the fight in order to defend Lebanon ultimately. So I think that they're likely to stay in this no matter what Israel does, because there's no separate peace. There's no separate agreement with Israel. That's been proven. And they can only hope that by engaging the Israelis, using their considerable military might and experience, that they can weaken it and help Iran, you know, and help each other. It's an alliance. Ultimately, it's an alliance. It's the axis of resistance. And this is the moment, from their perspective, that they would have to stand together.
And if not now, when would have been the same or very similar calculation, I imagine, that Iran would have made in terms of making use of its
they have to. From their perspective, I'm not giving advice. I'm analyzing that from their perspective. Look what has happened. You know, they're in a position. I mean, I know there were people who would say, "Oh, what?" You know, at earlier phases, in October of 24, then in June of 25. Why didn't Iran go all out? Why didn't Iran throw everything it had at Israel? And now we're at a point where Iran showed restraint so many times. Iran negotiated so many times. And twice now since June, the Americans and Israelis have used negotiations as perfidy, as cover for a war of aggression. And Iran went back and they negotiated, and they'd agreed to negotiate again in this last round. The Omani foreign minister al-Busaydi had said there was significant progress. We're coming back in a couple of days. We hope to be able to reach an agreement. So the political importance of that is that there can be nobody in Iran at this point who said this government was looking for war. This government was reckless. This government got us into this mess. Because on the contrary, they have showed restraint at every step. And even now they're showing restraint. I have to say that in terms of the tempo, it will probably pick up. But it's pretty casual right now in terms of only 3-4 volleys of missiles at Israel a day. And they're not sending dozens of missiles at a time. Yes, they are sending them north to south, you know, from the Galilee all the way down to Eilat and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. But they're sending 1 or 2 missiles to each area. But the effect of that is that all of Israel is paralyzed.
Yeah.
And they can keep it, and they will only pick up the pace. They are going to go for a long time. They've said no negotiations now. We're busy changing the map, getting, you know, removing the Israeli bases, removing the American bases. And so it's going to go on, but it's going to be costly globally. I mean, I don't know what the world will look like in a week, let alone a month or 6 months.
And Hezbollah has been even more restrained than if anything, than Iran. You know, as John laid out in his report, you know, 15,000 Israeli violations of the alleged ceasefire that there has been since the end of 2024, and you know, this was a point that the Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem made in his speech this week, that they had no choice. You know, they had specific intelligence that came in that Israel was about to strike them in a preemptive strike. So, it's a case of use it or lose it. They have this weaponry, and Israel made it inevitable that they would get involved again.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a decent place to leave it. We don't know what the world is going to look like in a week, but we will be back for more analysis and trustworthy news sourcing here at the Electronic Intifada, which we are always very proud of course. So let's take a quick look at our website. And we have just some incredible feature stories, of course, by our writers in Gaza. This story in particular, Why Israel Persecutes Children Like My Son Shadi, is written by a mother in the occupied West Bank. It's a remarkable and terrifying story of Israel abducting children, which it does every single day. Give that a read. There is some good analysis, of course, by Ali about the last week in the war on Iran. There we go, an enormous crime against Iran, which you referenced in your segment earlier, Ali. What have you been reading, and what can you point out to us on EI this week?
Well, I have to catch up with some of my reading. The piece by Rana Elias is a beautiful one about her son Shadi. The piece by Huda Skeik is really a lovely piece about people in Gaza learning and memorizing the Quran and how important their faith is to them in terms of just enduring. And it's a lovely piece, particularly during the month of Ramadan. So I hope that's one that people will look at. We have a little item there, which I'll just mention briefly, related to me. Last week, the Swiss Federal Council, that's the national government, admitted that the entry ban, which led to my arrest and detention and deportation last year, was unjustified. People can read that, but that's a very good statement because we still have some cases in court. And so now we've had a parliamentary report that has said that there were gross abuses. Now we've had the federal government say that. So we've covered the legislative branch, now the executive branch, and we're waiting for the judicial branch to come down on my side. Of course, we already won one court victory, but we still have more cases going. So that's just an update on that. People can read it. Thank you, Mabruk. The struggle for accountability and transparency will continue.
Yep. The struggle against European repression also continues.
Yeah. And I just want to point out to the piece from the two pieces on the side there under the blogs. The top one, that is the write-up by Eli Gerzon of last week's program. But for people who didn't see it, I really want to recommend, well, first of all, you can see that we've got John's prescient presentation last week on the military buildup around Iran. Of course, this was just 2 days before the war started that the show was. The article was published later. And also last week, we had that fantastic interview with Mohammed Shahade, a Palestinian analyst from Gaza, who is so knowledgeable about the whole Trump Board of Peace. How ironic, we were talking about the Board of Peace last week and it launched its first war 2 days later. But a really, really insightful interview with Mohammed Shahade. So if you haven't listened to that, I highly, highly recommend it. Take a look.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And of course, at the very top of the website, we have the Donate Now link there at the top right. So please hit that link, support this kind of journalism, support this platform, support our writers and contributors. that are devoting their lives to uncovering the truth and speaking from their own experiences, of course, whether it's in Gaza or the West Bank or around the world. Ali, who do we have to thank this week?
Nobody to thank. No, I'm just kidding. We have so many people to thank. And yes, Nora, you're absolutely right. That donate now button is important because that is how we fund all this work. Everything you saw this evening or this morning, wherever you are in the world, Jon's incredible analysis. Jon, you put that together in like 5 minutes, didn't you?
10. Cut him some slack.
Why are you laughing? Go.
120 hours.
120 hours. That is why you will not get analysis like that anywhere else, because
Can you imagine Christian Amanpour spending 10 minutes on the truth? No.
Half of it's trying to figure out what's true, right?
Yeah.
But that's what they've done. That's their tactic to flood disinformation into our space, and we fight back.
Yeah. So that's what I'm talking about. You don't get analysis like that without an incredible amount of hard work. Nora, you put that news report together each week in about 10 minutes too, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Between coffee and breakfast. Yeah.
And of course, the same goes for all the work we do on the website, all the articles that we publish. Everything is carefully edited, fact-checked. Takes a tremendous amount of time, and we love doing it, but you are the people who help us to do it, who help us to make it possible, who help us to continue to pay and support our colleagues in Gaza, our writers, our photographers, videographers. You're the ones who do that. So I want to say thank you to just a few of you, to Neil, to Salah, to Grizzly Dave. What a great name.
Grizzly Dave.
Caleb, Kareem, Tariq, Christina, Diana, Malika, Don, Iva, John, Jürgen, Salim, Michal, Yosef, Patrick, Ikram, Azhar, Dom, Jocelyn, and Justine. We appreciate each and every one of you so much for your support. If you want to be among our fantastic supporters, do go to electronicintifada.net and click that donate now button. There are also links in the description under the YouTube video. But remember, only donate if you can, if you have the resources, and enough of us do. Be generous so that those who don't can benefit from this information, because it will always be free. We will never charge for it. We'll never put up a paywall. Our mission is to inform the world. We are Palestine's weapon of mass instruction. So globalize the electronic intifada.
I hope going to say that.
It sounded to say that with those names.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Well, you are. I'm not. Apparently.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone.
Incredible. And of course, thank you to Tamara Nassar, who has just, she's perfected the art of editing and compiling and directing this program under tumultuous circumstances every week. Thank you, Tamara, of course. And
are you sure? I thought she just shows up at the last minute.
She just shows up. Yeah. She just shows up.
Tamara puts in an extraordinary amount of work before the show, after the show, at every stage, in addition to doing a whole lot of other things for this publication. So thank you, Tamara, and thank you to all our colleagues as well.
Yes, absolutely. Elie Gerzon for social media, Pierre Loisel for radio production, everyone at the Electronic Intifada. On behalf of us all, myself, Jon, Ali, Asa, and Tamara, thank you all, and we'll see you next week.